Hello, John, and thanks for being a short guest here on our stream for an interview. You were so kind to to play in the Mindbug TCG Invitational Tournament. Many people consider you to be the best Magic players of all time. So before we talk about Mindbug and the TCG Invitational, can you tell us a little bit how you got into playing games competitively?
Yes, Marvin. First of all, thank you for having me here, and thank you for having me as part of the Mindbug tournament. It was a lot of fun. My goal was to not humiliate myself, which I set to get at least one win, which I barely achieved. So I was very very happy. In terms of getting into playing, games and then games seriously and then games professionally, when I was a teenager, my father's company moved him to uh, to the United Kingdom, um, to a place called Windlesham, which was a little bit outside, a little bit south of London. And we moved there to a town called Woking, which is not too far away. Famously started as a graveyard for London, for those who like facts. And I don't. My dad was a gamer in a lot of ways. He used to go into work early to play games, on the mainframes back before you had PCs. We never had a new car, but we had a personal computer in the 1980s. He made me, like, there was one of the old games, Adventure, one of the first text-based games. He made me like a graphic-based one when I was a little kid. This was like 1983 graphics. So I was always really going to be that way. I played games on the computer with him. He read me Lord of the Rings, and I loved all that sort of stuff. So there I am in Woking as a 14-year-old, and there's a local game store called Fun and Games. And so I went in there, and I was, wanting to play more Dungeons and Dragons and role playing games, and there were some people there playing Magic. And of course, like a bunch of other people, like a lot of Germans, the bug bit me. Started to play, and I loved it. I moved back to the U.S. For my senior year of high school, back when I was 17. And it just so happened I lived in New Jersey, and the first Pro Tour was going to be in New York City. It's actually about a 5-minute walk from where I am right now, the site of the very first Pro Tour. Uh, I was under 18, so I was able to sign up for the juniors. I made a top eight. I did well in rating, and was able to qualify for the Worlds that year as a senior in the adult bracket, with rating. And then from then on, I continued on playing, and at some point, it went from being a hobby to being more of a profession.
That's an awesome story. So, when you started to look at Mindbug, how was what was your first impression of the game, and what do you think when you start playing the game, when you compare it to other card games you have played before?
Yeah. Well, one of the things I found interesting about Mindbug, well, first of all, knowing that you guys were involved, Richard was involved, Scav was involved, I thought it would be like a well-designed game. Like one of those games where like things just basically are going to work, pretty reasonably and pretty okay. There's not going to be things that are stupidly unbalanced, things like that. I personally am a fan of the games that on some level boil down to, well, if I do this, then he does this, then I do this, then he does this, or she does this, or they do this, and I do this, and it goes back and forth, and then you figure, okay, this is the thing that's going to, sort of give you the best chance to win based on the reasonable things they could do in response. Now, Mindbug, of course, adds another level to it, which is when you're looking at your hand, you're not, of course, thinking just about if I do this, they're going to do that. But even more important is if I do this, well, then I can do this and I can do that because, you have to worry about they're going to be taking your card. So it was sort of interesting in that, unlike a lot of other games, you're sort of analyzing your hand in terms of how it plays against itself. And that was an interesting spin that I hadn't seen before, which I thought it was really interesting to explore.
Yeah, actually, that was also yeah, that's the main mechanic of the game, and it really is amazing what it does to the game. So it allows us to basically have a game without a resource system because all our creatures can be super powerful because I mean your opponent could steal them at any time when you play it. So it's really an interesting take that you have to think about how you can beat your own cards in your hand.
Right. And then, of course, there's the other one, because sometimes you can't really beat the own cards in your own hand, right? You're like, yeah, man, if I play this and they steal it, I can do that, but then they can steal it back or do this other thing, and that's not going to work. But if I do this other thing, play this thing here, it doesn't really do anything. And so then, of course, like all of these games, there's a concept of, incomplete information, or bluffing. So sometimes you can be like, well, actually, if I play this card, it's really bad for me because they steal that, and it's like, it's like there's that two power hunter guy that gets like +6 on your turn,
Yeah.
right? And you're like, like, and so sometimes you have to play a card. You're like, well, if they steal it, it's actually kind of bad for me, but maybe I don't think they'll steal it. Usually, of course, you're trying to play the first card. You don't want to play the first card that's gonna destroy your own hand. And since you have information about your hand and they don't, then you get that level. Well, I'm going to play this, and I think they might not steal it because, maybe it's not that powerful, or I could have this common counterplay. So it just like, it's like one of the interesting things in like the theory of mind is like this, idea that like, I think that you think that I think
Yes.
that you think that I think, right? And a lot of games really sort of explore and move in that territory. And this does it in a different way that's sort of a lot more complex, but still, that sense where you're like, I can't see a path with my hand. It's actually good for me. So, I have to play in such a way that, that hopefully they don't know that this isn't good for me, so I can sneak it through. And as you can see, I'm already sort of getting into the weeds, which I think
Yes.
illustrates, a lot of the interesting design ideas you guys had behind the game, and the way you've executed it.
Yeah. Thanks. Are you someone who is so from what you've explained? Are you someone who is trying to think things through, like multiple turns ahead? What could happen if he takes that, and what then? Or are you at some point in time someone who says, okay, now I need to play from the gut and maybe bluff and see if I can sneak this card through? So, what's your preferred take on this game?
Yeah. So this is a really interesting question. It's like about Magic all of the time. And I realized at first that I wasn't even sure if I knew the answer to this myself. Because people would ask me why I did something, and usually it'll be like, well, it was the right play. Okay, now let me look and figure out why I did it, right? And I realized a lot of times these sort of thought processes are going on in the back of my head.
Yes.
So I think I have, in a lot of ways, like a very strong gut or intuition on this. But the way it works is that I think I'm actually just very good at knowing when to sort of go with my gut and allowing it to like move forward, versus knowing when, no, I have to sort of like stop this gut thinking and pause and sort of think ahead. But I think my gut maybe just naturally kind of does more of that progression ahead of time than maybe some other people's.
Yeah, I guess it also comes a lot with playing a lot. I guess that you have seen certain patterns in previous games, and you remember them maybe in the back of your brain. So yeah, having you as one of the best professional players of all time. So what would be your advice for maybe newer gamers that want to play games like Mindbug on a more professional level? What can they do to become a better player?
The answers are, that I've given. I always feel like they sound a little bit stock. I mean, the first thing, of course, is to play with better players. I think one of the most equally important things is to just be the sort of person who really likes to dive into your mistakes. Ask people, you're really like, what would you do here? What would I do here? Was this a mistake? Ask yourself this. What could I have done better? It doesn't mean, of course, like how it played out. You can make a play that's the 75% to win, and it plays out so in the other 25%, it doesn't mean your play was wrong.
Yes.
And a lot of people, and this is actually where I think younger people are better, and they can build these sort of thought processes. A lot of it's through games, is just having this healthy ability to self-criticize, and and to really want to like understand what's correct rather than being right. So, analyze the hell out of your mistakes. Talk with better players. Talk with worse players. Talk with players that are just as good as you. People who want to think about it seriously, and really approach it like that rather than being like, okay, like I'm the best, or I did this thing, or it's great. It's not interesting to examine your great plays or talk about them. Whatever. It's your bad plays. It's the little things you did wrong. It's the habits you have that are poor. These are all the things you really need to dive into. And the way you just do that is by playing with people, talking with them about the games, and trying to not have an ego when you're figuring out what the best choices are, what you should have done, or whether you did the right thing.
Yeah, that's something that's funny that I could share here. So when we started to give Mindbug to a lot of playtesters and watched them playing the game, and when the game ends, watched how they reacted to it, what we found out is that a lot of players, more than we have seen in other games, go back and say, okay, at what point of time did I make a mistake? Which mind bug decision was wrong? Should I have taken that card that I lost to at the end? So maybe did I spend my mind bugs too early? So the game somehow has this, I don't know, this DNA in it that makes people ask those questions afterwards. So maybe because there is um, a bit less maybe a bit less luck involved, like okay, I didn't draw the right resources at the right time, so you don't have this excuse in the game. So I don't know, it somehow tends to make people ask the exact same question that you just brought up.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think most serious game players have that thought pattern or those questions to some extent or another. I think, you guys are German. I think if you had Kai here instead of me, he would probably be giving a lot of the same things, just maybe in different words or different, slightly different taste to it. I haven't talked to Kai about Mindbug, but I'll bet you that his thoughts would be very very similar to mine. Because this is just a thought pattern that you have when you play these games really seriously and you're trying to get better and you're working with other people that feel that same way and have that same goals. And it's a goal you have whether it's a game you're playing for lots of money or if it's a game you're playing like Mindbug. It has a lot more to do with the interestingness and the sort of decision patterns and pathways in the game, more so than the size of the tournament or anything else. It's just gonna, I think, be one of those things that is going to resonate with all the people sort of from our universe who are interested in playing games and who play a game like Mindbug.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks a lot for being a participant in this TCG Invitational. Do you think it is Mindbug is a game that would be or is appealing to Magic players in general?
I do think, I mean, look, Mindbug is obviously going to be appealing to the going after same sort of players to play games like Magic. When Magic came out, it was it was coming out into sort of like a universe where there weren't as many of those games, right? My grandfather, and to a less my father, played a lot of bridge.
Hmm.
The people that had those sorts of ideas, play bridge, they play chess, some game here or there. And really, I feel like, gaming in the last 30, 40 years has taken off. And I mean, Germans have had more to do that with anyone else, where you guys start to move forward with these board games that were sort of not Monopoly, but more like advanced thinking, analysis type of games. And now there's a whole universe. These people, the internet, they come together, and Mindbug is squarely in that field. I mean, one of the things about Magic is a lot of the times, I'm thinking about maybe I'm going to go to this next Pro Tour. Look, I haven't played Modern in 4 or 5 years. There's been a bunch of like sets come out. There's no format in Magic I could just walk into right now unless it's a draft.
Yeah.
And you know, Mind Bug, it's just like a game you could like pick up and play for a little bit, play for fun. You're on a flight, you don't have that much space. Which interestingly is how Magic actually started, which was a game to be played, in between
Yes.
Dungeons and Dragons and things like that. Um, so but it's nice to have games that scratch that itch that you don't need to have an infinite amount of preparation or other things that go on before it. I mean, that's nice too, but you like both.
That's a very good explanation. Thank you very much, Sean. It was a pleasure to have you in the tournament and as a guest for the interview here. I wish you all the best and yeah, hope to see you in the future in one of the Mindbug tournaments.
All right, thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Goodbye.
If you enjoyed this video, consider liking it and subscribing to The Rules Girl for more rules videos.